The house stood at the end of a quiet street like it had been waiting for me all my life, its faded blue walls worn down by time but still strong enough to hold every memory I had ever known. It was not just a place to live. It was where my childhood still breathed in the creaking floors and the soft echo of voices that no longer existed. Every morning sunlight slipped through the thin curtains, painting the same golden patterns on the walls as it did years ago, and for a moment I could almost believe nothing had changed, that my mother was still in the kitchen humming softly while making tea, and my father was in the living room fixing something broken. With quiet patience I stayed in that house long after everyone else moved on, not because I had nowhere to go, but because leaving felt like losing them all over again. After our parents passed away, the world outside became unfamiliar and cold, but inside those walls I still belonged. Every corner held a piece of love, every scratch on the doorframe marked a memory of growing up, and every night I fell asleep surrounded by a silence that felt safe instead of lonely. My brother Daniel never understood that he left as soon as he could, chasing opportunities in cities that promised him more than this old house ever could. At first he used to call asking how I was, reminding me to take care of myself, telling me he would visit soon, but soon turned into someday, and someday turned into nothing. His absence became a normal part of life, like a room in the house that stayed locked and untouched. I told myself he was busy, that life had simply pulled him in a different direction, but deep down I knew he had chosen to let go of everything. I refused to forget that morning began like any other, quiet and gentle. I woke up early, made my tea, and stood by the kitchen window watching the empty street as if waiting for something I did not know was coming. The air felt calm, almost too calm, as if the house itself was holding its breath. Then came the knock. It was sharp and heavy, not the kind that neighbors used when they needed something small. It was the kind that demanded attention, the kind that carried authority, and something else, something unsettling. I hesitated for a moment before walking to the door, my heart beating just a little faster than usual. When I opened it, two men stood there, one holding a clipboard, the other staring at the ground as if he did not want to meet my eyes. Are you the current resident? The man asked, his voice flat and professional. I nodded slowly, confused by the question. Yes, this is my home, I replied. He glanced at the paper in his hand, then back at me with a look that almost resembled pity. Ma'am, this property has been sold. You are required to vacate within 24 hours. The words did not make sense at first. They sounded distant, like they belonged to someone else. Sold, I repeated softly, as if saying it would somehow change its meaning. That is not possible. There must be a mistake. But there was no mistake. He handed me the document, and I felt my fingers begin to shake. Before I even read it, my eyes moved quickly across the page until they stopped at the signature at the bottom. Daniel, my brother, my own brother. The paper slipped slightly in my hands as the reality settled in, like a slow, unbearable weight pressing down on my chest. No, this cannot be real, I whispered, but the ink did not change. The words did not disappear. Everything was official. Everything was final. The house, the only place I had left, was no longer mine, and I had not even been told. I felt my legs weaken, and before I knew it, I was sitting on the floor, the door still open, the men still standing there saying something I could not hear because all I could feel was the sound of my own heartbeat echoing in my ears. The walls around me suddenly felt distant, unfamiliar, like I had already been erased from them. Memories rushed in all at once. Laughter, birthdays, the smell of food cooking late at night, my mother's voice calling us, my father's quiet smile, all of it reduced to a transaction, reduced to numbers on a piece of paper. I grabbed my phone with trembling hands and dialed Daniel's number once, twice, again and again, until finally he answered. What? His voice was cold, impatient, like I had interrupted something unimportant. Daniel, I said, my voice breaking, please tell me this is not true. Tell me you did not sell the house. There was a pause long enough for hope to flicker inside me before he spoke. I did. The words were simple, casual, like he was talking about something meaningless, and in that moment something inside me shattered completely. How could you? I whispered, struggling to breathe. I am still living here. This is our home. It was a property. He corrected, his tone sharp and distant, and I had the legal right to sell it. Legal, the word felt like a knife twisting deeper. This is not about legal rights, I cried. This is our childhood. This is Mom and Dad. They are gone. He interrupted, and I needed the money. I felt like the ground beneath me had disappeared. You needed the money, so you made me homeless, I asked, my voice barely holding together. You will figure something out, he said dismissively. You always do. And then the line went dead, just like that. No apology, no hesitation, no guilt, only silence. I sat there for what felt like hours, staring at the walls that had once protected me but now felt like strangers. The house that had been my entire world was no longer mine, and the person who took it away was not a stranger, not an enemy, but my own brother. And as the reality sank deeper into my bones, one question kept repeating in my mind, louder and louder, until it drowned out everything else. Why I did not sleep that night, not even for a Second, because every time I closed my eyes the words echoed again and again in my mind. The house has been sold, you have 24 hours to leave. It felt unreal, like a nightmare I could wake up from, but every time I opened my eyes the walls were still there, and yet they already felt like they no longer belonged to me. I walked slowly from room to room, touching everything as if I could somehow hold it together if I stayed long enough. The hallway where we used to run as children, the kitchen where my mother spent hours cooking meals filled with warmth and love, the living room where my father would sit quietly after a long day. Each corner felt alive with memories, but those memories now felt like they were slipping away from my hands, like sand I could not hold on to no matter how tightly I tried. By the time morning came, I was not crying anymore. The tears had stopped because there was nothing left inside me except a heavy emptiness and one question that refused to go away: why I needed to hear it from him. I needed to understand how my own brother could do something so cruel without even thinking about me. So I picked up my phone again, my hand still shaking slightly, and called Daniel. This time he answered almost immediately, as if he had been expecting me. What now? His voice sounded cold, distant, like we were strangers and not siblings who once shared the same home, the same childhood. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself before speaking. Why? I asked quietly. I was not angry anymore. I was not shouting. I just needed the truth. There was silence on the other end for a few seconds, long enough for my heart to start racing again, before he sighed heavily, as if I was the one causing him inconvenience. You really want to know? He said. Yes, I replied without hesitation. Another pause followed, longer this time, and when he finally spoke, his words did not just hurt, they shattered something deep inside me. I sold it because of you. For a moment I could not even understand what he meant. The words felt twisted, unreal, like they did not belong in the same sentence. What does that even mean? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. It means I have spent my entire life cleaning up after you, he said sharply, his tone suddenly filled with frustration that I had never heard before. That is not true, I said quickly, but even as I spoke, doubt crept in because he did not stop. It is true, he snapped. When Mom got sick, who paid the hospital bills? Me. When Dad lost his job, who stepped in? Me. I swallowed hard, trying to process what he was saying. Those were things we went through as a family, things we survived together, but he was turning them into something else, something bitter. That was not your responsibility, I said. We were a family, we were supposed to support each other. Exactly, he interrupted, and I was the only one actually moving forward while you stayed stuck. His words hit me harder than anything else. Stayed stuck, I repeated quietly. Yes, he continued, you never left that house, you never tried to build a life outside of it, you just stayed there clinging to the past like it was going to fix everything. I felt tears filling my eyes again, but this time they burned differently because his words were attacking something I had always been afraid of admitting. I stayed because someone had to, I said softly. Someone had to take care of the house, someone had to keep the memories alive, someone had to remember them. Remember what? He said with a bitter laugh. They are gone. You cannot keep living your life for people who are not here anymore. That is not living, that is hiding. His words cut deeper than anything before because part of me knew there was truth in them, but that did not justify what he had done. So this was your solution, I asked. You decided to sell the house without telling me, to force me out like I did not matter. I did not force you out, he replied. I gave you a push you needed. You should thank me. Thank him. The idea felt so absurd that for a moment I could not even respond. Thank you for what? I finally managed to say. For making me homeless, for taking away the last place where I felt close to Mom and Dad. I freed myself, he said, ignoring my words. I needed that money, I needed to move forward, and I was not going to let that house where you keep holding me back anymore. The way he said it so coldly, so casually, made something inside me break completely. You did not free yourself, I said quietly. You abandoned me for the first time. He did not respond immediately, and in that silence I could almost feel that he knew I was right, but instead of admitting it, he spoke again, his voice harder than before. You will be fine. You always are. You figure things out. You survive. That is what you do. And then, before I could say anything else, before I could even try to make him understand, he ended the call just like that, leaving me alone with words that echoed louder than anything else he had said. I sat there staring at my phone long after the call ended, hoping it would ring again, hoping he would call back and say he was wrong, that he did not mean it, that this was all some terrible mistake. But it did not. The silence that followed was heavier than anything I had ever felt because it carried the truth I had been avoiding for years. Daniel did not see me as his sister anymore. He did not see the house as our home. He saw it as a burden, just like he saw me, and in his mind what he had done was not betrayal, it was relief. That realization hurt more than losing the house because it meant I had already lost him long before that day. I just refused to see it, and as I sat there, surrounded by memories that no longer had a place to belong, something inside me slowly began to change. The pain was still there, the emptiness still heavy, but beneath it something else started to grow, something quieter but Stronger, I was not just heartbroken anymore, I was waking up to a truth I could no longer ignore. I had spent my entire life holding on to people and places that were already gone, and now I had been forced to face a reality I never wanted to accept. There was nothing left for me. Here, no home, no family, no past to return to, and as that truth settled deep inside me, I realized something that both terrified and strengthened me at the same time. If I had truly lost everything, then there was nothing left to lose, and maybe, just maybe, that was exactly what I needed to finally stop living in the past and start becoming someone who could survive without it. I did not cry when the moving truck arrived. I did not argue with the men who stepped into the house carrying boxes and wrapping what was left of my life in layers of paper and tape. I simply stood there watching as every piece of my past was carefully taken apart, like it meant nothing, like it could be replaced or forgotten. But inside me something was shifting, something quiet and steady that felt unfamiliar. After all the chaos of the last 2 days, I moved slowly through each room, picking up the things that mattered most: photographs, old letters, small objects that carried memories no one else could see. Every item I placed into a box felt heavier than it should have been, because it carried not just weight but meaning. And as I packed, I realized something strange. I was not breaking anymore. I had already reached that point. The pain had already done its worst, and now what remained was something different, something clearer, sharper, almost cold. By the time the living room was empty, the walls looked bare and distant, like the house had already begun to forget me. And for a moment, I stood there in silence, remembering the laughter that once filled that space, remembering how safe it used to feel. And then I turned away without saying goodbye, because I understood that the house was never truly mine to keep, not anymore, not after what Daniel had done. I locked the front door for the last time, placing the key on the windowsill like it was just another object that no longer belonged to me. My friend's place was quiet, the world outside moving as if nothing had changed, as if my entire life had not just been taken from me in a single day. People walked on the streets, cars passed by, shops opened and closed. Everything continued as normal, while inside me everything felt completely different. When I finally reached the small apartment, my friend welcomed me with concern in her eyes, asking questions I was not ready to answer, offering comfort I could not fully accept. I thanked her quietly and placed my boxes in the corner of the room, suddenly aware of how small my life had become, reduced to a few belongings and a story I could not yet explain. That night I sat alone on the floor, surrounded by those boxes, the room unfamiliar, the silence heavier than before, because it did not carry the warmth of memories like my old house did. This silence was empty and real, and for the first time I allowed myself to think clearly about everything that had happened. Daniel had not just betrayed me, he had erased me from a place that defined who I was, and for years I had protected him, I had defended him, I had kept his secrets and stood by him even when he was not there for me, because I believed that was what family meant. But now that belief felt naive, almost foolish, because family does not destroy you and call it freedom. Family does not leave you with nothing and expect you to survive without a second thought. As those realizations settled in my mind, I felt something begin to rise within me, not anger, not exactly, but something stronger, a sense of awareness, a quiet understanding that I had been living my life holding onto things that were no longer holding onto me. And maybe that was my mistake. Maybe I had been too willing to stay in the past, too willing to sacrifice my own growth for the sake of memories that could never return. But even then, even with that understanding, there was still something that did not feel right, something about the way Daniel had acted, the way everything had happened so suddenly, without warning, without any attempt to involve me. It felt too easy, too simple, as if something was missing, and that thought stayed with me, growing stronger as the night went on until I could no longer ignore it. I stood up and walked over to one of the boxes, opening it slowly. Inside were old documents, papers I had not looked at in years, things my parents had kept organized in a way that always felt unnecessary at the time. But now, as I sat down and began to go through them one by one, I realized how important they might be. There were receipts, letters, official records, each page a small piece of the past that I had never paid much attention to before. My hands moved carefully, sorting through everything, until suddenly I paused, my breath catching slightly as I found a folder I did not recognize. It was labeled simply with our family name, nothing more. I opened it slowly, my fingers trembling just a little as I pulled out the documents inside. At first it looked like just another set of property papers, but as my eyes scanned the lines, my heart began to race. The words on the page felt sharp, clear, impossible to ignore. I read them once, then again, making sure I was not misunderstanding what I was seeing. The house, the one Daniel had sold, the one I had just been forced to leave, was not listed under his name alone. It was listed under both of our names, equally inherited jointly after our parents passed away. I felt a sudden rush of energy cutting through the exhaustion and pain that had been weighing me down for days. This changes everything, I whispered to myself, my mind moving quickly now, connecting pieces that had not made sense before. Daniel had acted like he had complete control, like the decision was his alone, but according to these documents that was not true. He could not legally sell the house without my consent, without my signature, and I had never signed anything. I had never agreed to anything, which meant the sale was not just unfair, it was wrong. Completely wrong. I sat there holding the papers tightly as a new feeling replaced the emptiness inside me. It was not joy, not yet, but it was something close to hope mixed with determination. For the first time since everything happened, I did not feel powerless. I felt aware. I felt like I finally understood something important. Daniel thought I would stay quiet. He thought I would accept what he had done because that is what I had always done before. But this time was different. This time I had something he did not. I expected. By the second day, I received confirmation that the buyers were already reconsidering pulling back as uncertainty grew around the legality of the sale, and by the third day the deal had completely collapsed. The transaction frozen pending investigation, and just like that, the certainty Daniel had relied on was gone, replaced by consequences he had never planned for. I did not call him, I did not warn him, I did not give him the chance to prepare because he had not given me that courtesy when he decided to sell the house out from under me. Instead, I waited, letting the situation unfold, knowing it would only be a matter of time before reality reached him, and when it did, my phone began to ring, his name appearing on the screen again and again, call after call, message after message. But this time I did not rush to answer. I let it ring. I let him feel the same uncertainty, the same lack of control, the same silence he had left me in. For once he was the one waiting and I was the one deciding when to respond. Hours passed before I finally picked up, and when I did not speak immediately. I simply listened. His voice was different now, no longer cold or dismissive, but tense, rushed, filled with something I had never heard from him before. Panic. What did you do? He demanded, the question sharp but unsteady, as if he was trying to hold onto authority that was already slipping away. I leaned back, my tone calm, steady, the complete opposite of his. I fixed your mistake. There was a pause on the other end, brief but heavy, before he spoke again, his words coming faster now. You had no right to interfere. This was already done. You are overreacting. Overreacting, I repeated quietly, the word almost strange in my mouth. You sold my home without telling me, without my consent, and you think I am overreacting? It was my property, he argued quickly, but even he did not sound convinced anymore. No, I interrupted, it was our property, and you knew that. The silence that followed said more than any response could. He knew he had crossed the line. He just never expected to be held accountable for it. You are going to ruin everything, he said finally, his voice dropping lower as if trying to regain control, but there was an edge of desperation now. The buyers are backing out. The deal is falling apart. I am going to lose everything. I closed my eyes for a brief moment, not out of weakness but clarity, because for the first time I truly understood the balance of what had happened. He was not afraid of losing the house. He was afraid of losing what he had gained from it, the money, the opportunity, the future he had built on something that was never entirely his, and now it was slipping through his fingers just like my home had slipped through mine. You already made me lose everything, I said softly, my voice steady but firm, and that is something you did not think about when you made your decision. This is different, he insisted quickly. You will be fine. You always figure things out. That same phrase, the same careless dismissal he had used before, but this time it did not affect me the same way because I was no longer the person he had said it to before. No, it is not different, I replied. It is exactly the same. The only difference is now you are the one who has to deal with the consequences. He let out a frustrated breath. Running out of arguments, running out of control. You are doing this out of revenge, he said finally, the accusation heavy in his voice. I paused for a moment, considering his words before answering. Honestly, no, I said quietly. I am doing this because you left me with nothing. And for the first time since the conversation began, he had no response, no quick reply, no justification, just silence. And in that silence, I felt something settle inside me, not anger, not bitterness, but closure. I ended the call without waiting for him to speak again, placing the phone down beside me and taking a slow breath as everything finally felt still. The fight was not completely over. There would still be legal steps, still consequences to face, but the outcome was already clear. The house would not be taken from me so easily, not anymore, and Daniel would have to face what he had done, not as a brother seeking freedom, but as someone who had crossed a line he could not undo. As I sat there, I realized something important. Revenge was never about destroying him. It was about restoring myself. It was about standing up in a way I never had before, about refusing to be treated like I did not matter, about reclaiming the part of me that had been silenced for too long. And as that understanding grew stronger, I felt something else rise with it, a sense of direction, a future that was no longer tied to the past I had lost. I would rebuild not The same life, not the same version of myself, but something stronger, something independent, something that did not rely on anyone else to feel complete, because this time I knew exactly who I was and what I deserved, and as I looked ahead, I did not see loss anymore. I saw possibility. I saw strength. I saw a life that was finally mine to control, and no matter what happened next, one thing was certain: I would never again allow someone else to decide my worth or take away what belonged to me, because I had learned the hardest way possible that sometimes losing everything is the only way to truly find yourself, and when you do nothing and no one can ever take that away again.